Hey there guys, how's it going? This is going to be a continuation of my previous experiment into exposure length and how long is enough, and how you're leaving anything on the table by going too long or too short, where we tested in broadband on M51. So for just those of you who haven't seen my last video, I tested 1 minute exposures versus 10-minute exposures on a broadband target with just UV IR cut filtration. And a few people mentioned after I offered to do so that they'd like to see a same kind of comparison but with dual narrowband data, and perhaps even with monochrome data at some other point for another experiment. But here is what we've got. So the very next clear night, I've devoted it once again to a bit of an experiment to share with you guys, and I want to see the results too, of course, as I find this kind of thing interesting. But I'm going to outlay now for you the parameters with which we're running for this session. So I've decided to scale back the max exposure for this one and go with just 5 minutes on the high end and 1 minute on the low end. For this test, we're using the same camera, the same telescope as last time. So that's the Celestron RASA 11, which is an f2.2 astrograph. And the camera is a Player One Poseidon C Pro, which is an IMX571 color sensor. Now, in terms of filtration, this time around, we're using a dual narrowband filter, the Optolong L-Extreme F2 version. So quite a narrow dual narrowband filter, and it's optimized for these very fast telescopes, so we're not seeing bandpass shift and things like that. It is indeed built just for this. Now, as you can see, IC 1396, for those of you familiar with it, it's the Elephant's Trunk Nebula. It's quite low right now, but it is going to be rising throughout the night, as you can see on Nina's graph right there, eventually reaching, if the night stays clear, what we're talking about, 47 degrees or so elevation there, so it's on the way up. But my actual sequence is set up like this. So we're running a 5 minute sub, followed by 5 1 minute subs right after, and I've kept the gain between them as close as I can while not disadvantaging overly much these short exposures. I want it to be representative of how you might actually go about doing this kind of thing. So for each one of those cycles, we've got one sub that's set to dither, which will of course dither every other sub from that point on. So we should be frequently dithered throughout this whole thing. And if we take a look now at the data that's coming in, if we just go on the imaging tab, I will show you first off a 1 minute sub. So we'll click on one of these. So here we are. This is a 1 minute sub that's just loaded in. Looks quite thin, you know what I mean, as you would expect even for such a fast telescope. The stars are very, very sharp, and there is still a fair bit of detail. Now, I should point out we are working with a very much illuminated moon tonight as well, so everything's really stacked against this, but I think it just spices up the experiment that little bit further, and makes it even more challenging for the telescope. Now, a 5 minute sub on the other end, in that same region, as you can see, it's far more rich, detailed, as you would expect. Of course, it's 5 times the integration for each one of these subs. But by the end of the night, we should have 2 equal stacks that we can take a look at and compare once again, maybe into 3 or 4 different individual processing steps, and hopefully from that be able to learn something from the experiment. At least that's my hope, and I look forward to showing you the results as soon as I have them. I just want to jump in really quickly and let you know about this before the next part comes on. Sometimes, of course, experiments throw up unexpected results, and this is an example of that. I really didn't expect this next part to go as it did. I'll leave that to be demonstrated to you in just a moment, but basically what I want to say is that there are absolutely going to be further experiments on this where I use a slower telescope. So I think the RASA and its incredible speed is almost certainly skewing the results that we're actually going to observe in this video by a notable amount. So I don't want to, give anybody any misinformation whatsoever. That's the last thing I want to be doing on this channel. I want to try and help people get the best images that they can, not, lead anybody down a wrong path. So that's why I am going to repeat, as I said, these experiments with a slower telescope, and hopefully then we'll start to see some, demonstrable results from those experiments that we can learn from too. So with that said, let's get on with this part of the experiment and talk about how this scope did. Alright then guys, so a few days later now, and I've stacked everything up and we are ready to do some comparisons. But before we do, I just want to stress something at the very start of this. I actually ended up stacking these images I'm about to show you twice because I was convinced I'd done it wrong the first time around because I saw so little difference. However, I did it all carefully again, and it was correct the first time. But I'm glad that I checked anyway, because the results are so similar in this case. I just couldn't believe it. It's not at all what I was expecting from this particular portion of the experiment. I thought that when we moved on to shooting with the dual narrowband filter in a much more, you know, photon limited environment, shooting a narrowband faint target, that we were going to see the 5-minute subs that I used for this experiment really start to pull ahead. But that's just not the case really at all. They are incredibly similar. I'm going to back this up with numbers for you in just a moment. So let's dive over and actually take a look at these series of comparisons. So I've set up 4 different sets of comparisons for you. Right now, this is just the base image with an STF stretch applied, just like the first comparison on the M51. This is cropped, however, this time around, but nothing else really has been done to it other than orientating in a view that we can see more clearly. Now, if we just actually take a look at the image, you're going to see between the two of them, I won't bore you to death with this because there really isn't much to see, but there is almost no difference. I think in a few cases the stars are a little bit tighter on the 1-minute subs, and that's perhaps to be expected, but it's certainly nothing desperately, you know, dramatic by any means. If we zoom on in this very small area down here at the base of the trunk, you know, maybe you can see some of these smaller stars right here are just a little bit tighter, for example, the ones that I'm mousing over. But again, it's really nothing dramatic. Now, we're going to take a look and try and quantify what we're seeing with some actual numbers to back this up. So if I just select the 1-minute sub first, the 1-minute stack rather, so both of these were 100 minutes. I go to scripts and image analysis and SNR. We're going to actually calculate, you see I've been doing this before, the SNR in these two images, the signal to noise ratio. So it's giving it as it right there in decibels. I'm going to do the exact same on the second image right now live, so you can see, you know, exactly what I'm doing to get to these figures. So these are cropped, by the way, to the exact same common area, so we're not integrating more background or something like that into one of these images rather than the other. They are the same. And as you can see, in terms of signal to noise ratio, in terms of decibels, right there, 42.09 in channel 0 on the 1-minute master versus 41.38 on the 5-minute master. So, arguably, the 1-minute master is very, very slightly less noisy. Kind of bears out what we saw in that first test, but it's not at all what I expected. Which means that I really do think we are going to have to do this experiment again, but with a much slower telescope, because I don't want to give people the wrong impression and, you know, have everybody with all scopes start moving on to, you know, 1-minute narrowband subs and things. Because I don't think it's a blanket rule that should be applied. Definitely want to test it out some more and see what we can pull. But now, if we just move on now to the next small comparison. So this is with Gradient Expert applied. Nothing else has been done whatsoever. And you can start to see the colors really starting to pop out now in both cases. Again, that same sort of observable difference between the size of the stars and the sharpness of some of the stars. It's nothing dramatic, you know what I mean? I think I noted a couple of small examples I want to touch upon just down here, perhaps. But really, you know, like these groups of small stars next to this major one right there, there's next to nothing in it, guys. You know, there really is next to nothing in this comparison. Now, once again, we can take a look, if you wish, at the SNR for both of these. It doesn't take long. So image analysis, SNR. So this is the 1-minute one getting done first. 42.33 decibels right there. And image analysis, SNR on the 5-minute. So we'll compare these once again. So a very slight difference in terms of decibels of SNR over the 3 channels in this image. Very slight advantage to the 1-minute subs. I guess those extra subs have just smoothed out the background that little bit more. So it does mean that in all cases, even with the 1-minute subs, we were completely swamping the read noise. It's really become a non-factor. even though we've got effectively 100 injections of read noise into the left-hand image, it just hasn't made much difference versus the 20 also injections on the right-hand image. There's really next to no difference between these, and in fact, even in terms of contrast, like we saw on the broadband test, there was some slight observable differences in contrast. None of that appears to be the same. Now that light pollution has largely been removed from the equation, I know it fully hasn't, but it has mostly been removed. It seems like it's made this test closer rather than a little bit further apart like I was expecting it to. So it came as a surprise to me, and it really does highlight the need for further testing, as I mentioned, in a few different scenarios. Now, moving it on one step to the wonderful RC Astro software, so I wanted to see how it would react. These same two things, as we noted some slight differences. The 10-minute subs seemed to, work a little bit better with deconvolution, but there weren't many to test from, so we can't really say anything for complete certain. But on this one, we're kind of seeing the opposite very, very slightly. So once I'd applied BlurXTerminator and NoiseXTerminator to these two images, I really started to scrutinize as best as I possibly could in order to see, what these things turned out like. How did they react to that treatment? And I have to say, I just note down here, there's a small group of stars in both cases I want to touch upon. Stars are very slightly better deconvolved on the left-hand side. I would say those 1-minute subs, you'll note the small groups of stars right there are just a touch sharper on the left than on the right. Again, it's not a dramatic difference, and were these not side by side, who'd know? You know what I mean? Being real. But there is a difference, even if it is a small one. So I thought we'd best observe it, as that's the point of this experiment, And again, as you can see, I won't bore you by diving into this too much. I really have tried to look for differences on this. There's just not much observable. So this is still in its linear phase, by the way. After this, I decided one final check that I wanted to do would be to pull the stars out of this and check again after actually making these two images non-linear. So you'll note these are now starless and stretched. So I'm just going to show you what the histogram looks like for these two, so you can actually see what we're dealing with. So I will select the 1-minute sub master first. Right there's the histogram peak. Just keep an eye on that peak for a moment, and I will select the 5-minute, and you can see it moves extremely small amount. So these are as close as I could get them in terms of stretch equality, if you like. Again, back to the 1-minute view, 5-minute view. There's next to nothing in it, right? I would say there is next to nothing in it. So now we'll do one final evaluation on non-linear data with the stars removed as well, just in case they were inputting any kind of noise to these statistics that we were observing. And I can tell you already, if we go image analysis, SNR once again, and just take a little look at these, there really is next to nothing in it. So I'll run it on both images. Hopefully this is helping someone out there. But again, I think, like I mentioned, further experimentation at this point is an absolute must. I don't want to give people the wrong impression with this, as I am using an abnormally fast rig. So please do bear that in mind as we're looking at this. But I thought it was still very interesting and well worth checking out, you know what I mean? So as you can see, very, very, very slight differences between these two. Across the 3 channels, what can be said? Both images look really, really good. It's turned out great either way you look at it. They've reacted really wonderfully to NoiseXTerminator, to BlurXTerminator. I'm just impressed either way. There is effectively no difference, in my case, using that RASA between 1-minute subs and 5-minute subs. So I probably just settle somewhere in between and not have the huge overhead of, hundreds potentially of 50 megabyte files to deal with. It takes a long time to stack, you know what I mean, of course, even with a fast PC. So As I've said, further experiments, absolutely a necessity, I think, at this point. So the next clear nights that I get, I am going to devote them to kind of furthering this experiment for you guys, as I'm dead interested in seeing the difference too, as I hope that you guys are. I feel like I'm learning things, and that's always a good feeling and a very good spend of an evening, I would say. I hope you're in agreement, and as always, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do hit that like button for me. It really does help me out, and a huge thanks to everybody who watched my previous video on this subject too. You really blew that one up, so thanks again for that, and as always, thank you to everybody supporting me and my channel in all the ways that you do. I appreciate you all a very great deal indeed, so thank you, and I will leave it at that. I will see you in the next video, where hopefully we'll have something a little bit more concrete to learn from. So yeah, until the next time, look after yourselves and clear skies.